Well, hey there, this is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. Welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be recreating the Weeknd's Die For You. And throughout that process, I'm going to be sharing some music production tips and techniques that you can use in your projects, such as layering your drum sounds in a unique way to get a really cool result in the end. We're going to do some really cool techniques with coming up with the bass line that we hear in the reference, and how to use your vocal as a great atmospheric element in your tracks. All this and more, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So here's my recreated version. So let's focus in on the drums. So here is the pattern. Pretty straightforward, but believe it or not, there's a couple little nuances and details that go a long way, specifically adjusting the velocity. So you notice that I have the kick drum playing at every quarter note. But what I've made sure to do is set the velocity and adjust the velocity for this kick drum so that I can have a stronger accented kick play on the downbeat of the bar on beat 1. And then as we go to beat 3, the velocity or the overall volume of that kick is a lot lower. It's different than just eliminating the kick in general. So if I just muted that, you can feel the bottom of that kick really help just get more weight to the snare hit. If we put this back in, now I don't need the kick to be as strong or as dominant as it is on the downbeat here. So just be sure to go to the sample that you want to set the velocity to, and over here in Ableton Live, make sure that you raise the percentage up to a specific number. Now you can do it all by personal taste, but the higher the number you choose, the higher the percentage, the more impact the adjustment you make to your velocity will have. So obviously if the low number, it's going to take more of a drastic change of the changing of the velocity to have an effect. So I left it around here. It was good. And that gives me more of that accented on the downbeat, and it's still present there for the snare drum. So it goes a long way. The same thing for the hi-hat as well. This is now the opposite. I'm going to have less of an accent here on the downbeat and more on the upbeat here. Again, different than not having it. It's still present. It still adds texture to the kick as it's playing at the same time, but the upbeat is what gets accented. Next thing is we have the snare drum, which is a 606 basic snare, but then I've decided to actually use the analog synth in Ableton Live. So in Ableton Live, in the drum rack, I can actually load or drag and drop instruments, VST plugins, and stock native instruments into a cell here and have them triggered by actually playing the note that triggers that device. Now, the reason for having the analog in here is because I wanted to be able to use white noise kind of layered on top of the snare drum, but to have a little bit more freedom and control and shape the way the noise will respond. So that's what we have here. So in order to do that, this analog is a 2 oscillator synth. So I made sure to just turn off oscillator 1 and 2 and enable the noise mode here. Then selecting the color, so that's the range, and then having the filter to basically just either filter out the higher brittleness part of the sound. And I'm using the filter here to actually give a little bit more character to the sound. So it's not just the white noise, it's actually adding some character to it. And that is by adjusting and shaping the actual filter envelope here. And this is the benefit of actually using a synth in the drum rack as an actual hit that I can do, that I can trigger. And once I have that there, I go into the amp envelope and set the settings here as well. I don't want it to be long. I want it to be nice and short, so I'll bring the sustain all the way down and adjust, play around with the decay a little bit. And create some unison here so that there's a little bit of spreading. Add a reverb directly onto this and a chorus directly on. So this is without the reverb and chorus. And then when I put the reverb there and then put the chorus, we have this nice wide sound. So as I play these together, the snare and this analog, it's a unique texture that gets added to the snare drum. Another thing to consider too as well is that I want the close hi-hat and the open hi-hat to work together. As you can see, the moment I click this open hi-hat, it just lingers. So I need it to shut off the moment the close hi-hat plays. And I can do this by enabling choking. So choking, if we go into our drum rack here, we can go ahead and click, open up the drum rack and choose a number. In this case, we'll choose 1, and anything with the same number will cancel each other out or choke each other out. Sounds weird that way, but that's what it does. So that means that anytime a number or sound is playing that belongs to the choke group, it will either cancel or stop the other members of that group. So for instance, when this plays and I play this, there we go. The hi-hat immediately closes the moment the close hi-hat plays. Let's go ahead and recreate that bass sound. It's a really cool sound. It's got that nice, wide, brassy type of tone and texture to it. So I'm gonna head over to Ableton Live's wavetable, but you can follow along using any 2 or more oscillator synth that you might have in your DAW. I'm gonna start with a sawtooth because that's gonna give us more of that bright, brassy type of sound, especially if we lower the octave a bit. So I'll start off with oscillator 1 on sawtooth, and I'll do the same thing for oscillator 2. Let's already go ahead and switch oscillator 2 to about 1 whole octave lower, so -12 semitones. And let's see where we're at just with the riff alone. So it's not it. So let's go ahead and use our cutoff filter to kind of filter that away, add a little bit of resonance so it peaks around that, wherever it is that we're cutting it off. Now what we need to do is create some movement with that cutoff. So head over to the matrix and route the filter frequency to the envelope. Let's say maybe around 30, let's just see. All right, and let's switch from polyphonic to mono. And now let's head over to envelope 2. This is where we're going to shape the way the cutoff filter opens because that's what we mapped it to, envelope 2. So let's bring the sustain down. I'm always going to start with the sustain down and then bringing the decay down a bit. So just doing a little bit of adjusting there, and that seems good. Now what's gonna help the sound get that nice wide tone that we hear is by adding the unison. So we'll stick over here to the classic mode. Let's try messing around with some of the percentage amount. I'll go back to oscillator 1, and we're gonna slightly detune that just because if I detune this a little bit more, it's kind of like, I like what the classic unison is doing. Now as I go to the oscillator and I start detuning, it's actually going to push it a little wider. So let's do that. Add some filter drive so that we can get a little bit more energy coming out. And that's great. And now let's go ahead and use an EQ. And my reasoning for this is I just want to, I will put it right here, low pass, and just take a little bit of the low end. And maybe just a little, smooth the high end out. And the reason for this is because I actually want to then layer this. I'll duplicate the same exact bass line, and I'm going to have another synth, but just focusing on the sub frequency. So by duplicating the bass line that we have here under the track below, we now have a one oscillator set to a sine wave. And that's going to get some distortion here by the amp plugin, setting to the rock mode, and an EQ to just take all the high end away and focus on that low energy. And so if I play these together now, I can have more control and balance a little bit of the sub and the low end of the bass line, and will give a little bit more of that wideness if I want. And if I put this with the drums, now I'm going to send some of that first top synth a little to my send and return track B, which is just a room reverb. As I go to the reference of the song, we're hearing that main melodic element that's just kind of played. I originally thought it was like a lead, maybe like a sine wave just going up. And then as I listen closely, there's some nuances there. It almost sounded like a vocal that was just really pitched up, because there's some little performance hiccups that are just left in there that make it really cool and unique. So I thought, yeah, let's just do that. Let's just use our voice and treat it as an element to add to create that atmosphere. So what I have here is a vocal that I just recorded, just did my best to kind of mirror the actual riff that I heard. Now, obviously, I cannot sing that high, or else I would be able to summon bats and giraffes. I don't know if that would happen, but what I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and take my whole vocal performance here. I'm going to select all of these. Here it is at the regular octave. So what I decided to do was just go ahead and transpose that by taking this, not just one, but two whole octaves, and making sure that I've set the Complex Pro algorithm for the warping. And now we'll go ahead and go click on the pitch and 24. So that's 2 whole octaves higher. And if we just take all of these effects off. So yeah, sounds like a dying cat. But anyways, I digress. I'm going to use an EQ just to eliminate all those artifacts that now are really evident in the low mid-range once I've just transposed this piece up. And then some overdrive to add some drive and crunch that I thought I was noticing. And I'm not, at this point, I'm not too sure exactly what's being on there. It's more like what feeling or what vibe do I get by listening to the reference. It feels atmospheric. It feels like there's some grit to it. So that's why I'm deciding to put some overdrive on there. And then I'll filter that out. And then what causes a lot of the space is the reverb directly on the sound. And then opening up, making it a little bit wider with some chorus on there. This kind of helps just blur it out a little bit so it's not, too direct. And I'm just making this a little bit wider using the utility plugin in Ableton Live. So I've taken the original vocal take, I've duplicated it right here on the track below, and this is the normal octave. Very similar. Got an EQ here to do that, and instead of the overdrive, I just use, the pedal overdrive here, lower the bass, and I just was playing around with the dry and wet. It's the same plugins, just in a different order here. And the reason why is, while I was just experimenting, I noticed that having the higher octave and having the reverb after the filter allowed for more space, more of the reverb to be evident. Filtering out the reverb here makes this fall a little bit further back in the mix. So I'll layer the two. Right? And so now let's listen to it with everything in. All right, so then we move on to the keys. Now these are just really here to provide some atmosphere. So this is the Addictive Keys Mark 1, just a basic Rhodes patch. With a delay and a reverb directly on there. Remember, this is just to create the atmosphere and space. And then I'm gonna layer the keys, same exact riff and line. Just gonna duplicate that and have that track here with the Orbit plugin. This is the plugin. I love using this plugin for this exact thing, where I use it as a way to layer a key or a pad and add some nice atmospheric texture to it. It's just a great element for that. And Orbit is absolutely free. It's a plugin that I created, and it's been an amazing tool in my toolbox. And I also have the Octave Vox going through sending some of that to return track C, which has a doubler plugin here by Waves. Just adding a little bit of extra width there just to kind of help smear it a little bit more on the track. And yeah, that's it. And that's really kind of getting that initial vibe down. And now there might be some other elements. Obviously, I think The Weeknd is putting in another couple layers there with the vocals that I think just add some nice lush texture there, which I'm trying to kind of recreate with the Orbit layering in there. So that's kind of my logic in doing that. So some big takeaways for me while recreating this track was using the analog synth to layer on top of the snare drum to get a really cool, unique texture to that rather than finding another drum sample. Using the vocal 2 octaves higher. Now, the reason I got to the 2 octaves higher is I actually took the reference and I transposed that a whole octave lower to listen to what is the Weeknd's voice doing. Let me sing it at that register, and then I can go ahead and transpose my own vocal. So I pitched down the reference to get it more of a sense of what's happening there. And then I went ahead, recorded it at that register, that octave. And once I had that, I then duplicated and had the original, and then just raised my pitched up one about 2 octaves higher. Hope that made sense. So, and I hope this video was helpful and encouraging and inspiring, that you can pick up a couple of these production tips and use them in your projects. And as my gift to you for watching this, I'd love to send you Orbit as a free plugin that you can use in your projects. It's VST3 compatible and audio unit compatible, so you can use it in anything that takes audio unit and VST3. So it's yours, absolutely free. Just go ahead and click the link below in the description box or visit beatacademy.com/Orbit to access this plugin. So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to the video just so you can stay up to date with upcoming videos that we're going to be releasing. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.